This week, we talked about stakeholders, the people at the helm of the port city. Let's take a few minutes to reflect on what you've learned and see how you can implement it in your portfolio. It is important to know who the agents are in your story. Many external events and contingencies influence what goes on in port cities, but actors, whether they are individuals, action groups, companies, or institutions, have influence as well. This is good to keep in mind when you write your text. When you write, try to avoid the passive voice and use the active voice. Not only does this make your text more lively and clear, but it also forces you to be specific. Who did what and when? Let's dive into English grammar real quick. The active voice is the simplest kind of sentence. For example, the sailor eats the burger. When you make it passive, you put the object first and add a form of to be to the verb. The burger is, was, or has been eaten. And you can add by whom, the captain, the subject. Let me give you an example of why the passive voice can be problematic. In 1968, the first containers were introduced in the port city of Rotterdam. Well, we all know that containers did not just drop from the sky. We want to know who introduced them and how. So let's rephrase this and make it active. In 1968, a coalition of port companies introduced the first containers to Rotterdam. Much better, don't you think? Besides sounding a bit vague or even dull, the passive voice can seem evasive or even a bit suspicious. Here's an example of that. Mistakes were made leading up to the oil spill disaster of 2010. Yes, we get that mistakes were made leading up to the disaster, but what is important is to know who was responsible for which mistakes. Let's try again. Leading up to the 2010 oil spill disaster, oil company X repeatedly ignored safety concerns by its personnel. We now know who made a mistake and what it was about. The passive voice is not always bad, though. When the stress is not on the subject, the actor, but on the object, then the passive voice often makes sense. For example, when you want to talk about the cleanup after the disaster. It took many years before the ocean was finally cleaned. Here, it is not so important who cleaned the ocean, but the stress is on the long period of time it took to clean the ocean. A good rule of thumb is to use the active voice when you can, and use the passive voice only when the active voice distracts from the topic of the sentence. Now, start writing the first paragraph, focusing on who the main players are. Also, try to address the stakeholders that you didn't think of right away. Write a few sentences, 150 or 200 words on this topic, and don't worry if it doesn't add up to a full paragraph yet. But rest assured that you can use what you have written now during the next few weeks. Also, you can revisit the introduction you wrote last week and see if you can already fill in some gaps. Maybe you can even find a few passive sentences that you can make active. Good luck and see you next week.